Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
His job was working as a lineman for a power company. But in his spare time, Tad Duert loved to ride motorcycles. The U.S. Marine Corps veteran joined Jarhead's Motorcycle Club, where he rode with other veterans and active servicemen from New England. It was a way to give back. The club put on charity rides and held fundraisers to support veteran causes and volunteered to serve lunch at the VA hospitals. On June 21st, 2019, the morning started out foggy. The club's annual meeting was taking place in New Hampshire that day. Lunch was a barbecue. Tad had 2 or 3 beers and then stopped drinking after lunch. He knew the plan was to ride on Route 2 to the American Legion for more food and for the fundraiser to continue. Around 6 p.m. that evening, they left for the American Legion. A group of riders got into formation, close together, staggered, 2 lines, one in the left lane, one in the right lane. Tad found himself in a place he wasn't used to, in the back of the pack, as he rode with about 15 other motorcycles. They set out on their journey.
Several motorcycles, maybe 8 motorcycles, were coming down from the cabins from the other end, and for some reason, I stopped, and I was just I stopped and let them all proceed in front of me, which put me at the very back. So my wife and I would have been where they were, the ones who lost their lives.
Later in a courtroom, Tad told what happened next.
I went through this a number of times last night. I couldn't fall asleep. I studied the photographs. I studied my testimony, and it just brings it all back. So I had to go over it a number of times, knowing that I was going to speak today. So bear with me for a moment, please.
How much time did you need, Mr. Duert?
Made a left out onto the road. Looked over to my right-hand shoulder, over my right shoulder, and I saw that it was clear. Big Mac was on my right. I turned around, and at that same moment, I saw an explosion of fire and chaos with motorcycles and a pickup truck. The initial impact would have happened before I witnessed it, so I would not be able to say where that happened and when it happened. All I know is when I looked up, the impact had already happened, and the truck at that time was already halfway through our lane heading towards the tree line. When I saw the truck was halfway through our lane at that point, making contact with the rest of the motorcycles, plowing them into the tree line. From what I can remember and visualize in my mind is that the truck was cutting through the middle of our formation of motorcycles. When people ask, what was it like at that time, the only thing I can say is it was like a movie scene. You know, sometimes you have a movie scene where there has a lot of explosions and a lot of parts flying and a lot of chaos and stuff like that, but in reality, it's really happening.
7 motorcyclists died from those terrible moments of fire, steel, and aluminum colliding when the Dodge Ram, pulling a 42-foot steel trailer, smashed into them like a wrecking ball. The driver of the pickup truck was 23-year-old Volodymyr Zhukovskyy, who was later arrested and charged with nearly 24 offenses, including negligent homicide. Volodymyr, or Vlad as everyone called him, was a Ukrainian citizen who had migrated to the United States at age 10. He had recently acquired his U.S. green card and was living in Massachusetts, working as a truck driver. He had been on the road in New Hampshire that day because he was returning home from a job. How many people died? Vlad had asked during the police interview, before he learned the full extent of what had happened. 7, a sergeant told him. Oh my gosh, Vlad said. 7 people? In 2021, he stood trial. Vlad, who had recently overdosed on heroin, had admitted to police that he had done drugs the morning before the crash. He had agreed to a blood test that would show how much was left in his system. But was that going to be enough to convict him and hold him responsible for the deaths of 7 people? His attorney was mounting an aggressive defense. And their star expert witness? You might be surprised who it was. This is Jillian, and in partnership with Law and Crime, you are listening to Court Junkie, episode 226. Vlad Zhukovskyy had snorted heroin and cocaine the morning of the crash. He openly admitted to the police. In court, neither side disputed that. Both the prosecution and the defense agreed on that fact. Vlad had used drugs. We don't minimize it. We're not going to try and justify it, his defense attorney told the jury. But the prosecution and the defense argued over what the traces of drugs that had appeared in Vlad's toxicology results actually meant. If you believe the prosecution's opening statements, Vlad's drug use and not paying attention on the road are directly what caused the crash. I caused the accident. I wasn't looking, Coos County Prosecutor John McCormick said. These are his words. He admitted he wasn't paying attention. He admitted he crossed the yellow line. He admitted he snorted drugs before getting behind the wheel that morning. And he admitted causing the crash. And what you're going to hear and see is that every single eyewitness who saw this crash confirms that the defendant crossed the yellow line. The defendant was all over the road, and he hit the motorcycles while they were driving in their own lane. But if you believed the defense's opening statements, the heroin and other drugs had no effect on Vlad, since the crash occurred more than 12 hours later. At the scene was a 200-foot-long trail of destroyed motorcycles and debris and broken bodies. This wasn't an accident, the prosecutor insisted. This was criminal recklessness from a man who had been seen driving dangerously before the crash. Everyone on the road didn't matter. He didn't care, he said. That's what this trial is about. Reckless choices and the deadly consequences. Defense attorney Steve Merkin argued that there was somebody else to blame for the terrible motorcycle tragedy, and it wasn't his client, Vlad. No, he said the person responsible for triggering the crash was the lead motorcycle rider, Albert Woody Mazza. According to the defense, Woody, the president of the Jarheads Motorcycle Club, was drunk, wasn't looking where he was going, and then lost control of his motorcycle. Woody's blood alcohol content was 0.135, which was well above the legal limit of 0.08 to drive a car. Merkin told the jury that investigators had only looked at Vlad after the crash. They didn't ask if any of the motorcyclists had been drinking or if there were any other possible factors that had caused it. When the toxicology results for Woody showed his BAC of 0.135, state police investigators didn't follow up and probe further. Why? It didn't fit their narrative, Merkin said. He cautioned the jury to keep an open mind and to listen closely to watch what the witnesses said they saw, especially where they saw Vlad driving carelessly. He wanted the jury to especially look at Route 2, where the passing lanes start and end, which was near the site of the crash. He noted that many of the witnesses would be inconsistent or had changed over time. Maybe that's because memories fade, he said. Maybe that's because it happened so fast. Maybe it's out of loyalty to the club. The crash, killing 7 people and injuring others, was tragic, he acknowledged. But our job here is to decide from the evidence how this happened, why it happened, and who's responsible. And unfortunately, the truth is that Albert Woody Maza was responsible. He was riding on the center line. He wasn't watching where he was going. He was coming across the line and he was drunk and he lost control of his Harley. Drunk drivers kill. Al Maza was drunk. Vlad Zhukovskyy is not guilty of any of these charges. But Woody Maza was not going to be able to defend his name during Vlad's trial. He was one of the riders killed in the crash. In Randolph, New Hampshire, a granite memorial went up to pay respects to the 7 people killed in the crash. On it were the words, "Never forget." The Jarhead victims ranged in ages from 42 to 62. They were from New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. In addition to Albert Woody Maza, their names were Michael Ferrazzi, Desma Oakes, Aaron Perry, Daniel Pereira, and Joanne and Edward Keur. They left behind children, spouses, siblings, and parents. Between them, there were many years of service in the U.S. Marine Corps. From reading his obituary, readers would know that Albert Maza was an animated presence, so you always knew when he walked into the room and how he helped others without asking, like when he recently built a handicap ramp for someone in need. Michael Ferrazzi's career sounded exciting. He worked at one point at the U.S. Department of the State Diplomatic Security Detachment at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. He eventually came back stateside and worked in local law enforcement. Desma Oakes, a new motorcycle rider, had found something she enjoyed doing after going through 2 heartbreaks, the death of her 4-year-old son and the death of her husband, both to cancer, according to the Concord Monitor. Aaron Perry, a proud Marine, his obituary said, loved working on cars, playing pool with his friends, target practice, and doing winter activities like skiing and snowmobiling. For Daniel Pereira, a priest who knew him well, told WMUR Channel 9, Dan was the kind of guy who was friends to so many. His goodness, his kindness, his gentleness always showed through in what he did. And Joanne Keur died riding on the back of her husband Edward's motorcycle. Edward was killed too. Edward was a mechanic and was proud of his reputation as a handyman you could count on. Joanne worked as a nurse, and her personality sounded bold, someone outgoing and strong-minded who liked a good adventure. Many of the Fallen Seven's family and friends and the Jarheads Motorcycle Club wanted justice for such a tragedy, for so much life lost on Route 2. The loss extended deeper than the 7 people killed. Some of the surviving riders from the crash had suffered serious injuries and emotional scars from that day. Assuredly, they would never be the same. The first thing Tad Duarte did in the immediate moments after the crash when he stopped his motorcycle was to make sure his wife was okay. Then he pulled out his phone, used his teeth to take off his gloves, and called 911. He then snapped quick photographs of the burning scene.
And then at that point, someone answered the phone at 911, and I told him that we were involved in a bad accident, that we need fire, police, ambulance, and we need a helicopter because I think we have more than one fatality.
He said he went around to see if he could help anyone. He saw several people who were down. He tried to make verbal contact with them, but he could tell they were deceased.
I didn't know at that time we had a couple individuals that were in the fire in the front of the truck. I did know we had one to the left of the road, which was Danny Boy. We had one underneath the trailer. I know we had Woody down top of the street. When I realized that I couldn't help the ones that were already deceased, I went up the street to help up at the front of the pack. By the time I got up there was a towel or a blanket already covering Woody. And at that moment, we had one individual who was down, which was Josh Demon. He was injured very severe, losing a lot of blood. He was as white as that cup for losing the amount of blood that he lost. I'd never seen anybody that white.
He said he used a belt as a tourniquet to stop the bleeding on his leg. Once they did that, they started taking a head count.
There was still some people missing, and that's when we realized there was a couple in the fire. We couldn't get in there to help or do anything. It was the fire got out of control.
He said it took about 20 or 25 minutes before any help arrived. He testified that he saw the pickup truck driver removing his personal items, which looked like headphones or a cell phone, from the truck. The driver then walked down the road, west from the crash.
First thing I'm thinking is he's trying to leave the scene of an accident. And I confronted him. I don't remember him saying this, but in my testimony that I gave to Trooper McLaughlin on my testimony, I guess I said that he said to me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I don't remember that, but in the heat of the moment, I don't remember that. But I was irate, and I know I was swearing at him because of what he had just done. But I never made contact with the driver. I was nose to nose with him, and I'm telling you, right up close. And later, I was asked if I thought he was drunk, and I would honestly say no. There was no smell of any alcohol on his breath or anything like that. That was only for maybe 30 seconds.
In the nick of time, an off-duty, plain-clothed police officer appeared and took control of the situation.
And you also told them that you think the driver was scared. You remember that?
He looked nervous. I would imagine it would be too if I was in his shoes. I mean, it was an accident, but, it was a horrific accident. Okay.
On the stand at Vlad's trial, Tad was having to explain and go over events that happened in seconds or less, moments that happened in a flash. He testified that he hadn't seen anything unusual from the motorcycles up ahead. No swerving, no drifting, no sliding.
So what I saw was just the impact coming across the road. I did not see anybody driving erratic. At that time, we were pulled out into the road, and what happens is the motorcycles need to get into their formation, left, right, staggered, and that's what we were in the process of doing at that moment.
Under cross-examination, Tad testified that there had been a keg at the lunch cookout. He remembered drinking 2 or 3 cold beers from it. He admitted he hadn't told the detectives that he and Woody had been drinking. The reason why, Tad said, was because the detectives never asked him about it. Tad also testified that the club usually had a safety briefing where the members made sure everyone was wearing the right safety gear. They set the order to ride and got organized before they left. But that evening, they were running late to the American Legion, so they skipped the safety briefing and just left. Other witnesses on the road, but who weren't connected to the motorcycle club, testified about what they saw from their cars. Ann Barron, a registered nurse from Maine, was a passenger in a car while her husband drove. They were headed west.
Well, I was looking down at my phone because I was trying to make sure our reservation, we were going to the right place and had all our the addresses correct in the Google Maps for directions. And so I was mostly looking down at the phone, but then my husband asked me to look up, and he said that the person in front of us was driving, like I think he said something around the lines of like, look, this guy driving, this is like, it's not safe or something, or it's not good driving.
What did you do in response to his statement that look up, this guy is driving, it's not safe? What did you do?
I looked up and I saw the truck driving in front of him.
And what did you observe in terms of the truck's operation at that point?
I saw that the truck crossed over the line with like the driver's side of the tires, crossed over the line and then came back, and then crossed over the line fully. And then there was a car coming towards him towards the truck and came back across the line. So he was driving on our side again in front of us.
Okay, Ms. Barron, I'm just going to take you back just a little bit. So when you're talking about crossing the line, what lines did you see this truck cross?
So I saw him crossing to the left over the yellow lines.
Feeling nervous, the couple let the truck go further ahead, trying to keep more space between them. Anne went back to her phone. A short time later, they stopped abruptly because up ahead, there was the same pickup truck from before across the road and motorcycle parts scattered and smoke billowing out. Anne ordered her husband to stop the car so she could get out. She went into nurse mode, helping whoever she could, even though she didn't have medical supplies. All she had was her hands and her years of medical experience.
I was thinking if I could help in any ways, because obviously there was a huge accident, and so people must be hurt.
Anne's testimony depicted the horror of the crash, the triage, the chaos, the rush to find and help the survivors.
I went to the left. I saw this guy had lost part of his leg, the bottom half of his leg was not attached anymore, and he was bleeding, and it looked like he was kind of holding, and this other guy was sitting next to him holding like a belt around his, I believe it was his right leg, and he also had like a gash on his head, but it wasn't bleeding out or anything. He was talking to us. So that looked like it was under control, and he seemed like he was talking to us, and I said if there anything I could do, but they said it was okay. And so then I ran to the, kind of turned around and went to the right, and there was somebody there, but there was no pulse. And he, didn't look like there was any life left in him. There was no breathing, no pulse. And I kept running. There was an arm on the ground. There were pieces of motorcycles. I don't really know much about motorcycles, but I can't imagine that they're from anything else. Black shiny pieces of vehicles. There were some helmets scattered around. I did go and check, and there was somebody who was breathing and had pulse. And so we made sure that somebody stayed with him. I was with him for a little bit. His name was Dan. I learned that later because then I came back and sat with him. But at this point, I was just kind of running around and seeing what we could do if there was something that, somebody needed another set of hands or something right away.
She said there was a person underneath the trailer, and she overheard people talking about more victims being in the woods.
Somebody said, I don't know who it was. Somebody was saying that the truck might ignite and that you probably shouldn't go towards there. But being a nurse, it was hard to not at least look and see. And there were a couple bodies in there, and we were yelling in, and nobody was yelling back. And so then I said, I have to go back to this guy that's breathing. So I turned around and I asked a couple of people, if they, to deal with the truck, and try and get it more stable so we could go in and see if there was any help that we could help with inside in the woods, because there were obviously a few people in there.
She told the jury that it felt like an eternity for the ambulances to arrive. Vlad's drug use on the day of the crash and his history of overdoses was going to be an important part of the prosecution's trial strategy. One expert witness taking the stand was Donna Papson, a forensic toxicologist from MS Laboratories, a private lab outside Philadelphia. She testified that when Vlad's blood was collected about 2.5 hours after the crash, there were signs of heroin in his body. She detected a substance that is made when the body breaks down the drug. She called it 6-mam and said it was unique to heroin. But there wasn't a lot of it found in Vlad's blood. She testified the level found was below the reporting limit, the concentration of substances that can be measured accurately. And that's why she got involved in the case in the first place, because the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory wanted her private lab to do additional testing to see if there was any 6-mam found below the reporting levels.
So for every test that's performed, we have what's called a reporting limit. So that reporting limit is the concentration that we can reliably see with accuracy and precision. So in this case, for 6-monoacetylmorphine or 6-mam, our reporting limit for our testing is 1 nanogram per milliliter. Now, the question essentially was, is there 6-mam present but below that 1 nanogram per milliliter? Essentially, if you had a result that was 0.99 nanograms per milliliter, that's below the 1 and it wouldn't be reported. So that was the question. I was evaluating the case to see if there was the presence of the 6-mam below our reporting limit, and that's viewable through our review of the analytical data. The morphine free of 17 is in the 002. You can see that all the way to the right. You have the morphine free of 19 in the 001, and now the 6-mam free of less than 1 in the 001.
She was asked how long she would expect the 6-mam to be present in the blood after the use of heroin.
For an estimate, I would think, and now it does, for the body to clear most of that original dose, you're talking about within the 6 to 7 half-lives. So to be conservative with that high end of that 30 minutes, you're talking about 3 hours, maybe 3.5. But again, people can be much shorter, so it could be less time than that.
Could be less than an hour.
Yes, depending on an individual's ability to break that down.
Okay, so if after 3 hours or 3.5 at tops at most, the 6-mam will be completely metabolized and clear from the heroin user's system.
Most of the original dose should have been pretty much gone from the system.
Okay.
She testified that if heroin was snorted, it would take about 5 or 10 minutes for 6-mam to reach its peak.
And so after that snort, after that 5 or 10 minutes, it's going down. Is that fair to say? Just like this graph represents, you're eliminating that 6-mam.
Yes, so essentially you get heroin into your system, you peak very quickly, you reach your top concentration, and then you scale down.
Okay, so but in this case, after 5 or 10 minutes, you're starting to scale down on the 6-mam.
Correct. You're scaling down the 6-mam, and you're likely increasing morphine. So that's the other thing to consider, that as you're decreasing 6-mam, it's breaking down to that morphine metabolite.
So fair to say that the level of 6-mam is coming down, the morphine's going up.
The prosecution also called firefighter paramedic Paul Novinsky. Paul, who is from the western part of Massachusetts, had been a first responder since 2014. On May 5th, 2019, just over a month after the fatal crash, Paul responded to an emergency call in an area with public parking where locals often hiked down to go fishing or picnic by the riverside. The call was for a male unresponsive. It was Vlad. He was lying on his back where the trailhead meets. He was blue and wasn't breathing. He also wasn't responding when anyone spoke.
What happened when you arrived on scene?
When we arrived, we found the male party unresponsive, not breathing at all. Agawam police, prior to our arrival, who also carries Narcan, they carry it to be used intranasally, had administered 4 milligrams of Narcan to the patient before we got there.
Narcan is medicine often used to help someone who has stopped breathing from an opioid overdose. It's been credited with helping save lives.
Did you obtain any information from bystanders?
Yes. I can't speak to exactly who it was, whether family or friend, but it stated that there was some heroin he had consumed, I believe, snorted.
And when you say he had consumed, do you mean the individual who was unresponsive?
Correct.
A bystander told you that the person who was unresponsive had sniffed some heroin?
Yes.
Okay. So after obtaining all of that information, what did you do?
At that time, we began bag valve mask breathing for the patient with our BVM. That was my partner doing so while I obtained an IV in his, I believe, right or left arm, and I proceeded to give 2 more milligrams of Narcan IV push. He pretty promptly woke up, began breathing on his own, his color improved, and began holding conversation.
And what happened next after the patient improved?
We then loaded him onto our stretcher and put him in the back of the ambulance to continue monitoring, put him on our heart monitor, etc.
He said while in the back of the ambulance, Vlad admitted to consuming heroin, 3 bags of it. He said Vlad also asked him questions about where his license was.
He had mentioned that he wanted to be sure he still had his license, and he had expressed concern that he would lose it. He did state to me that he drives trucks and that he was very concerned about that. And I told him and reassured him we had his license and the police had done nothing more with him. They released him to us.
The prosecution rested its case, and the defense began theirs with a rather surprising witness, one of the lead investigators who would tell the jury he had made a big mistake. After the prosecution rested its case, there was a surprise in the courtroom. The defense had filed a motion to dismiss all the indictments against Vlad. And in the middle of the trial, Judge Peter Bornstein dismissed 8 of the 23 charges. He said there wasn't enough evidence for those 8 charges related to whether Vlad was intoxicated or operating under the influence of drugs or alcohol. In his ruling, he cited testimony brought up in the trial. Even though Vlad admitted to using drugs at 8 a.m. that morning, witnesses and law enforcement at the crash scene didn't see signs that he was high or drunk. The 15 charges left standing against Vlad were 7 negligent homicide charges, 7 manslaughter charges, and a reckless conduct charge related to Vlad's driving. Now it was the defense's turn to present their witnesses. Vlad decided not to take the stand. The closest the jury would get to hearing from him in his own words would be hearing his recorded interview with the police. But his defense called 2 other witnesses. One was State Trooper Dan Quartully. He worked full-time in the New Hampshire State Police Collision Analysis and Reconstruction Unit. For this particular crash, Trooper Quartully mapped out the scene, surveying the site using high-tech mobile equipment. He pinpointed exactly where he found evidence on the roadway and created a scaled diagram to help determine what happened on that evening in June 2019. He acknowledged the severity of the crash. It was the worst one he had seen in his career.
So you're talking at the time you investigated this crash, you had investigated between 100 and 150 crashes, roughly?
Roughly.
This was the most severe and significant case you had ever investigated?
Correct.
Most amount of damage?
Yes.
Most amount of carnage?
Yes.
Most amount of victims?
Yes.
Most amount of vehicles?
Yes.
Huge scene?
Yes.
Hundreds, thousands of individual pieces of evidence?
There could have been, yes.
Okay. And you went scene by scene with that, through the scene piece by piece with a laser measuring device, measuring roadway evidence, correct?
I did.
But modern technology isn't immune to human error.
I was rushing to put out work product and made a mistake.
He said he saw a mark at the scene and initially believed a motorcycle left it from an avoidance maneuver. Then he later changed his mind and determined it was just a flat tire mark. That changed all his findings.
With that mark not being from the motorcycle and knowing the characteristics of the crash, it puts the truck further towards the center line than I initially would have believed.
Initially, he had believed Vlad's truck was about 1.33 feet over the center line in the wrong lane, which would have caused a head-on collision. Now he was saying he believed Vlad's truck hadn't crossed over, but was on or near the center line of the road. He testified the crash was unavoidable.
To my recollection, I believe 3 seconds away from the collision would have been the first moment when Mr. Zhukovskyy and El Maza would have been able to even visualize each other. They still wouldn't have been able to perceive each other as a imminent threat at that point. In my opinion, it was largely unavoidable based off the circumstances. But depending on either party, we know that there was possible impairment issues on both ends, and that could have skewed that time. That could have slowed or delayed their reaction time.
There was a quick recess in the testimony. Then the judge spoke.
Members of the jury, the witness's last statement regarding possible impairment on the part of any parties is stricken from the record. You're instructed to disregard that statement.
In their closing arguments, the prosecutor told the jury, "What happened here isn't a mystery. It's just as obvious today as it was 3 years ago." The driver of the crash, the person driving recklessly and endangering everyone on the road, was clearly identified as Vlad. He said no one saw Woody, the president of the Jarheads Motorcycle Club, impaired or driving off the road. Multiple witnesses, however, identified Vlad as the one driving dangerously.
It's not a who done it. We've heard a lot of excuses. We've heard a lot of distractions. But it is clear what happened here and who caused this crash. The only way the defendant is not guilty is if Al Maza was the sole substantial factor, the only substantial factor in this case. That is the only way the defendant is not guilty. And we know that's not the case. The defendant already admitted he caused this crash, that he killed these people, that he endangered the lives of everyone else. He admitted his guilt in the seconds and minutes and hours after the crash. And he has been consistent about that and was consistent about that. That was the overwhelming thread of consistency in this case from the very beginning. No amount of argument, no opinions, no reasonable approximations that were thrown about the courtroom changed that. No amount of attacking witnesses can change the honest answer of what happened here. Because the honest answer today is the same honest answer it was 3 years ago on June 21st, 2019. The honest answer is that the defendant caused this crash, that he caused those deaths and nearly killed the rest of those friends. The defendant is guilty of manslaughter. He's guilty of negligent homicide, and he's guilty of reckless conduct.
During the defense's turn, Vlad's attorney reiterated that it was Woody Maza responsible for causing the crash. The motorcycle club president was drunk, he said, lost control and slid across the road. Vlad admitted to causing the crash when he spoke to police, but that wasn't really true, he argued. He simply had no idea what had really happened. He said Vlad had no idea that Woody was drunk. He reminded the jury that the prosecution intentionally hadn't called any of the state police who had conducted the crash reconstruction.
So despite the state committing an enormous amount of resources, personnel to high-tech robotic laser surveying devices, camera drones for the collection of evidence and interpretation, the state didn't even call those troopers in their case. They didn't call them because the car unit doesn't agree with their version of the story that they're trying to feed to you.
It's because the state didn't want you to know what those troopers were going to say, he said. They didn't want you to know that their own accident reconstruction unit contradicts their story about how this accident occurred. The only just verdict, he insisted, was for Vlad to be found not guilty. It had been an emotional 12-day trial. Court was back in session on August 9th, 2022. After less than 3 hours of deliberations, the jury reached their verdict. Vlad, who was now 26 years old, had spent the past 3 years in jail. Then he learned his fate. He was acquitted on all charges. After the verdict was read, Vlad took off his glasses, wiping away tears. The families of the crash victims seemed to be horrified. One reporter overheard somebody say, "What am I going to tell my kids?" In a post-verdict statement, Vlad's family said, quote, "Our family expresses its deepest condolences to the family and friends affected by this tragedy." They called Vlad a very honest and kind man. He would never have done anything to hurt anyone. But Vlad wouldn't be returning to his old life from before, living in Massachusetts, working as a truck driver. The verdict had set off a chain of events. After he was acquitted, he was soon taken into custody by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Vlad was a Ukrainian citizen who had a U.S. green card. WMUR Channel 9 reported that his status as a green card holder meant he had temporary protected status, so he couldn't get deported. But Vlad, an ICE spokesman told WMUR, has an extensive criminal history, including 3 prior convictions of charges that included possession of cocaine and heroin, possession of drug paraphernalia, driving under suspension, furnishing false information to an officer, and larceny. As of late December 2022, when this episode was written, Vlad was still being detained, so he hasn't been forced out of the country yet, nor has he been freed. Immediately after the verdict, high-profile state officials reacted to the news that Vlad had been acquitted. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu issued a statement that said, "The fallen 7 did not receive justice today, and that is an absolute tragedy. I share in the shock, outrage, and anger that so many have expressed in the 3 years since the 7 members of the Jarheads Motorcycle Club were taken from us. My heart goes out to their families, friends, and loved ones on this especially dark day." And the state's Attorney General, John Formella, released a statement saying, "Our trial team did an excellent job, and we firmly believe that the state proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Mr. Zhukovskyy should have been found guilty of the charges in this case and held responsible for causing 7 deaths and numerous injuries. We thank the court and the jurors for their service, and while we are extremely disappointed, we respect the verdict and our system of justice." Several organizations blasted the governor and the attorney general's responses, however, calling them inappropriate. These statements are irresponsible, dangerous, disrespectful to the jurors, and damaging to the integrity of the criminal legal system, the New Hampshire Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers said in a statement. And the American Civil Liberties Union of New Hampshire said, "We're concerned with the Attorney General's criticism of the jury verdict in the Zhukovskyy case because it conflicts with the American Bar Association criminal justice standards for the prosecution, which state that a prosecutor should avoid comments that criticize the jury's actions or verdict. These standards are vital as they help ensure that future juries are independent without undue pressure from prosecutors that could influence their decisions. The constitutional right to a jury of one's peers is a bedrock part of the American criminal justice system, and the work a jury does should not be criticized by prosecutors simply because of disagreement with a verdict in a high-profile case. And that's all for this episode. As always, I'd love to know what you think about this case. You can let me know by joining the conversation on Instagram at Court Junkie, by tweeting me at CourtJunkiePod, or by emailing me at podcast@courtjunkie.com. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Russon. If you'd like to hear these episodes without the ads, hear additional Court Junkie bonus episodes, and receive our weekly newsletter covering the most fascinating court cases of the week, please check out our Patreon options at courtjunkie.com/support. And don't forget to check out Court Junkie's sister podcast, Civil, which covers cases that go through our civil court system. You can catch recent episodes on Hulk Hogan, the alleged I-10 shooter, and Rebecca Zahaw. Search for Civil wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.